when I started playing professional cricket, it was the captain, and that was it really. It was his job to lead the team, and he had to do pretty much everything himself. Nowadays, obviously, there is a support staff alongside the captain to help, devise a strategy to hopefully be successful. So there's a lot more work goes into preparation. There's a lot more work goes into managing players and making sure that players, are given the best opportunity to perform well. Leadership now is important because, without a leader, where do the players go? Who do they follow? You need to have a common goal, I believe, and you need to have a common plan of how you're going to achieve that goal. And we as leaders hopefully facilitate that and put those plans together for the lads then hopefully to go out and carry out. So I think, without a strategy, you aren't going to be successful. So there's myself as Director of Cricket, Mark Arthur, who's our Chief Executive, and Jason Gillespie, who's our first team head coach at Yorkshire. We're basically hopefully going to entertain a few guests, really talking about management in sport really and managing the business. And from my point of view, I've got a support staff that I manage and oversee, and want to talk about how that works and my management philosophy and management style really with that group of people. Mark Arthur will talk about managing the business and the staff not directly involved with the cricket team, and obviously Jason Gillespie will talk about the management of the players. He's at the cutting edge, if you like, of professional sport, and the challenges that we have when we're dealing with players.
Let's start a couple of years back when things were not quite so rosy as they currently are for Yorkshire. You weren't here, Jason. You weren't here. Martyn, you were here as Yorkshire had to take a fairly good look in the mirror at what was going on. You've been relegated. Just take us through the process of changing the management team.
Yeah, I mean, it was, as you say, a disappointing summer, 2011 for us. Having had a previous year was pretty good. We finished third in the championship and got to a semi-final of a one-day competition. So it was a big shift in team performance. But the biggest problem really was off the field. And I came back to Yorkshire in 2007 and kind of inherited a coaching staff. And cutting a long story short, that wasn't working. The dynamic wasn't right. My idea of how I like my support staff to work is, we clearly all have a common goal. How we get there is open to discussion, and I like open and honest environment. So I'm not someone who wants people just to say yes, to anything I might suggest. But at some point, someone has to make a decision of which path you take. And the way I tried to design that support staff, if you like, and I knew there were going to be issues when I came back, because I knew the personalities involved, and there was a couple of strong personalities in that group of coaches at the time. So what I tried to do from day one was try and build up an agreement of how we should work, and why we were doing what we were doing. So hopefully, I would avoid any potential issues. Unfortunately, over a period of time, that didn't go to plan. And it was a lesson to me really of seeing the signs that something is wrong and that you need to act quickly. And I suppose in hindsight, I would have acted quicker if I had my time again. And it's about really, I'm sure you have all experienced it in some way. It's about, we have a meeting, we discuss what we're going to do, we come to an agreement, and then outside the meeting you have your individuals who say, I don't agree with that, or we shouldn't be doing this, and then that's obviously then portrayed to everyone outside that support staff. And particularly when it then gets to the players as well, then clearly you're going to have a problem at some point.
I remember asking you, as you made the changes, that you were the one that was left. Everybody else went, and that you had to, take a long, hard look in the mirror yourself, hadn't you, at your role?
Yeah, of course. When your team gets relegated, the first person you blame is yourself. I was fortunate that I had in Colin Graves as our chairman, someone who believed in me and who gave me his 100% support, and he understood what I was working with, and he understood the things that were going wrong. So as a result of that, he fully supported a change in the structure of our coaching department.
So in you come, what was the environment that you walked into?
Well, it actually wasn't too bad. It was, we had a new support staff. The players, I think there was a bit of excitement that there was, some different voices around. I suppose I came in with a clean slate in a way, as well as our second team coach, Paul Farbrace. Richard Dams was also came on board full time, having worked, with the club for a while before that. So, in a way, it was a bit of a clean slate, really. And I didn't really know the ins and outs of what gone on in the past. You pick up bits and pieces in general conversation, but for me, that was gone. And as first team coach coming in, I could only control, what we could do moving forward. So that was the sort of attitude that I had throughout that whole period.
And what would you say your leadership philosophy is in terms of the role that you have with the first team?
I'm very clear on that. I really push fun and enjoyment, because after all, we're all here because we love the game of cricket. Martyn's director of cricket, Yorkshire, he loves cricket. Mark's CEO, he loves cricket. I'm the first team coach. I'm a badger with cricket. We all love it. Players, the reason they play, obviously it's a career for them, absolutely. But at the end of the day, they've got to enjoy what they're doing. So, I'm very clear with, the philosophy and way I work. It's fun and enjoyment. I always put family first for everyone. For me, that's absolutely crucial. I think if you're happy and content with your life, you're going to arrive at work in a pretty good frame of mind and ready to attack the job at hand with giving it your best effort. And I think Martyn touched on something that's very important, and something that is really important to me as first team coach is that clear communication and all the coaching staff on the same page. Absolutely crucial. And for me, I take it a step further. I extend that to everyone on the staff. We've got some wonderful people working in our office. They're part of the team, in my view. We're all in it together, and we've all got to find a way to work towards a common goal, which is, be a successful club on the field, be a successful club off the field.
So, Mark, you're the last one in. You came in a year ago. What did you walk into financially? Let's deal with the finances. What did you walk into financially with the club? But you, on the field, a club that was going in the right direction again?
Well, financially, I was advised by some very close friends not to take the job. 20 million pounds in debt, turnover of anything between £6 and £7 million. It just didn't stack up. But I like a challenge, and 10 months later I realised I have got a challenge. But for me, there wasn't a chief executive effectively for 2.5 years. I think Colin would agree to that. He was chairman and did the role on a part-time basis. I also felt, as a non-Yorkshireman and a lover of cricket, that perhaps there was a bigger opportunity than had actually been taken advantage of in the preceding years. So it's quite ridiculous in the 150-year history that it's only in the last 10 years the club has owned the ground and effectively been master of its own destiny. So I saw the brand of Yorkshire cricket is absolutely magnificent worldwide, and it's something to really tackle. From an operational point of view, I inherited some really good people, very small team, and Colin said, you can't cut it any tighter than I've already cut it. He wasn't Mr. Cost Cutter for nothing. He just, but there's some very good people, and perhaps what they needed was day-to-day leadership, and hopefully I've been able to give that to them over a period of time, and we are certainly now heading in the right direction. Very fortunate that on the field, things have been sorted out and we're heading in the right direction, and good people off the field that probably just needed a bit of fine-tuning.
So how does it work between the three of you? If there's an issue, if there's a problem, who goes to who? What happens? What's the hierarchy?
Well, we talk. I think in any organisation, it's really important to communicate well. I'm the overall boss. When I took over, Colin effectively said, "Here's the keys. By the way, I don't live in Yorkshire. I live in Kent. You won't see much of me, but I'm on the end of a phone." And after about 3 or 4 weeks, I picked up the phone and said, "Look, I'm really sorry I haven't been in touch with you, since I took over, but I've had no need to, really." And he said, "Well, that's why I've given you the job." So he's allowed us to very much get on with it. We are an executive-led organisation. You hear about a lot of sporting organisations that have to report into committees on a monthly basis. Martyn's totally in charge of cricket, and I regard my position as being that of supportive to him. So if there's any decisions to be made, he'll probably have made it in his own mind about cricket, but he'll come to me for authorisation and clarity, and probably, he'll be 95% of the 95% there with his decision, but probably needs a little bit of support to go over the line.
So when you sign a player, do you pick the player? Do you pick the player? You sign the cheque? How does that work out?
Again, we talk about it. I might go to Martyn and say, "Got my eye on this bloke. I think he might fit in well to our group," and we'll discuss it. And it just comes down, as Mark said, communication, and we'll talk that through. We'll involve our captain, Andrew Gale, ask him his thoughts. But ultimately, I'll speak to Martyn and we'll discuss it as a team, really. And then it just goes from there. And then if we think it's a good idea, then we go to Mark and to whether we can get the green light or not.
I think that for me is the strength of the last couple of years, is the fact that we do communicate, and where everybody's included in discussions. So that is our strength currently. Is there are no egos, no agendas. It's not about Dizzy wanting to be the best or anybody else wanting to be the best. We all want to provide success and help provide success for Yorkshire. That's our aim. So it's not about individuals, it's not about personalities. So, we do communicate, as Mark and Dizzy said, it's about us talking to each other. And our coaching setup now is very clear. Dizzy's in charge of the first team on a day-to-day basis. We've just taken on a new second 11 coach in Richard Dawson, because Paul Fabres, who was second 11 coach previously, has now gone on to be head coach of Sri Lanka. So Richard starts his job in April. So he will have responsibility to run the second team as he sees fit. And Ian Dews is our academy, he runs the academy. My job is to, like Mark with us, is to help and support that in any way I can. But they are given the responsibility to run those teams.
Given you've talked, you clearly all get on very well and do get on. How difficult a decision was it? Because Paul was very much part of that, wasn't he, Paul Fabres, when he came in? Yeah, that must have been quite a bolt from the blue a little bit, that he was going and you had to bring somebody else in. How difficult was that, and what were you looking for in that second team coach to fit in with the group?
Well, we obviously wanted someone, with the skills in coaching, clearly. So we needed a good coach. But we also needed someone who would buy into, our principles, if you like, and our methods, i.e. the communication, happy with, the setup, buying into the fact that once a decision's been made, that's what we're doing, and we've got a consistent message, particularly with the players. So we don't want any what I call wriggle room with the players. That's one of my phrases, isn't it? That, we give this message. I mean, there was a great example of this, I think, with the Yorkers. There's one that when you first came in last couple of years ago, Jason, I hope you don't mind me calling him Dizzy.
That's fine.
I'm not used to calling him Jason, it doesn't sound right. When Dizzy came in, he was very clear that at the end of one-day innings, when we're bowling, that we should bowl Yorkers. For those that aren't technically minded about cricket, a Yorker is, if you can imagine the batsman's toes, the ball kind of is aimed at the batsman's toes without bouncing, so it's right up near the stumps, which in our opinion is the hardest ball to hit at the end of an innings when people are trying to score boundaries. So Dizzy came in and said, we're just going to bowl for the last 6 overs of the innings, we're just going to bowl Yorkers, end of. In the past, you know, there's lots of discussion about what type of delivery bowlers should be bowling at the end of an innings, and there's lots of different ideas on that. So when this was given to the players, some said fine, others were questioning it. And early in the season, second 11 one-day game, one of our more senior bowlers went to Paul Fabres and said, look, I don't think Yorkers suit me at the end of an innings. I need to mix it up. I need to mix, you know, slow ball, bounce, or whatever. I need to mix it up. So Fabi, as we called him, said, yeah, well, that's fine. If you want to do that, that's fine. But if you want to play first-team cricket, you've got to bowl Yorkers. You know, so there was no wriggle room. You know, that was the message. You're bowling Yorkers, that's it. And, you know, the lad was a bit taken aback to start with, but then, you know, he realised if he wanted to play first-team cricket, which clearly he did, he's going to have to learn how to bowl York as well. You know, so that was for me an example of the difference between now and the past, where it might have been, yeah, I agree with you, you know, it's stupid, you know, batsmen will line you up, they'll know what's coming, etc., etc. Whereas now that's what we're doing.
So what do you do with a senior player, you know, a proven player, let's say, I'm not going to name no, but a proven player, done his stuff, who says, it's better for me to do it this way? Do you just say, nope, forget it, you're doing it my way, or is it a conversation? How does it go?
Well, you have conversations, obviously, but you know, if the team's decided, and bear in mind what Martyn was saying about the Yorkers, it did come down to a team decision. So that's where we didn't want any wriggle room in that particular situation. But you know, a senior player or an experienced player comes in, it's very clear. If this is the team plan, this is the team plan. You know, this is, you know, I use a phrase that an old coach of mine that I played under years ago. He always said, "There's this is where the bus is. This is the bus stop, and this is what time the bus is leaving. It's your choice whether you get on that bus or not." And you know that's always in the back of my mind with these sort of things, and you know, certainly with the team dynamic. And you know, fortunately at this stage, I think we've got a very good bunch of senior players. You know, they're on board with what we're trying to achieve.
And is it fair to say you've had to get rid of a couple who weren't? Or let them go?
Well, yeah, we've had some players move, and that's the nature of sport, isn't it? You know, players move on. But look, we feel that we're in a position where we've got a really strong squad. Everyone is buying into it, and you know, I think that starts with that environment that we've strived and worked really hard to get right. You know, there's always room for improvement and things like that, but we feel we're really going in the right direction with that. And you can always tell when things are going quite well when you do have senior players as well as young kids coming through, you know, all being quite tight with that.
But I think the thing, you know, just going on, finishing off the point about the Yorkers is that decision wasn't just made because Dizzy thought it's a good idea. It was made on the back of him seeing that it actually works. You know, and that first year of using Yorkers at the end of an innings, you know, 2020 cricket, we got to finals day. We lost in the final. You know, and we had two bowlers in Mitchell Stark, Moin Ashraf, and sometimes Ryan Sidebottom, who executed their skills brilliantly. And that won us any number of games, didn't it? Yeah, you know, the opposition were scoring 6, maybe 7 and over at the end of an innings. We were scoring like 12 to 15 at the end of an innings, and that was a massive difference. So, you know, there was substance behind the plan, and obviously when the lads saw that it worked, then it was easy. The difference last season was we didn't execute our Yorkers as well, and we finished next to bottom in the group stages. You know, so I think when you have got a strong message like that, it is important that you're pretty sure that it works. You know.
Another thing that they've created is a culture. They've got a culture within their environment. And when they're looking to, you were talking about recruitment earlier, when they were looking to recruit players, and recently Kane Williamson and Aaron Finch, they have looked into the humanities of the individual cricketer. They know that they're very good cricketers, but would they fit into the dressing room that they've got? Because these guys, live together every single day of the summer, and if you've got one bad apple in there, it can really upset the harmony of the dressing room. And I think you can take that into any office environment as well. If you haven't got somebody that is completely in tow with the culture of the rest of the office or the staff, then you can have yourself a problem. So the culture that they've created there and the way that they operate has filtered through onto the administration side. So we now operate as very much one unit. And I've had 23 years of professional sports administration, and this is the first example where the on-field staff administration are totally in tune with the off-field, and that is down to these guys.
I'll ask you this one first, and we'll go back to Aaron Finch, because I'm intrigued as to he would have cost a bit of money, but we'll go back to that one. Obviously, with these guys, if it's working, you get results on the pitch. Teams are winning, you're doing well. How does that reflect for your staff? It's not quite so easy, isn't it? You're not top of a table, bottom of the table.
No, and we cannot take results into account. We have to sell the culture, we have to sell the brand, and the largesse in Yorkshire is part of the DNA of many people. 5.4 million people living in Yorkshire. We are told that 1.5 million have an interest in cricket. There are 747 clubs playing cricket in Yorkshire, and every weekend 117,000 people over the age of 14 are playing cricket in Yorkshire. So we've got a pretty good start. What we've had to do is to engage with those people, because there has been a disconnect between the County Cricket Club and the wider cricketing family of Yorkshire. So we've been working very hard on that side of things.
Can I just make the point as well? People sat there thinking it's all, sweetness and light and all roses with our group of players. Let me assure you, it's not. For me,
you can leave now, Disney.
As a coach of I think about 14 years now being a coach, and for me, managing people is one of the most difficult things I've ever done, because everybody's different and everybody's got issues, and particularly in sport, if you're not in the team, you're going to have a bit of a sulk now and again. So for us, managing our group of players, even though we feel we've got a good set, is still a challenge. And you've seen, we won't mention names, I think we all know them, that there are, individuals that are very talented who don't always tick the boxes that you'd ideally want of a player for Yorkshire. So, you'd sometimes have difficult characters to manage, and it's, a challenge of how you do that to, because potentially, and most of the time, your difficult characters are potentially your match winners as well. So, do you want
to shall I bring up Kevin Peterson? He's not yours, he's not your problem.
No, he's not.
So, from the outside looking in, what would you have done?
It's very difficult, Tanya, and I don't mean to sit on the fence here, but
we weren't in the dressing room.
The absolute reality is that none of us here have been in that dressing room day to day to understand exactly what's going on. I mean, if I looked at it purely from a statistical point of view, this is a guy in his last 3 Test series has averaged twice under 30 and once under 35. So from a statistical point of view, you could argue that he's been left out on form. But you hear, second, third, fourth hand, you hear all this other stuff that's going on. But as I said, that's in the dressing room. You don't know. But it is a difficult one, because everyone wants to see players like that play, and the general public want to know why. They go, what's going on? He's a match winner and things like this. But the management are there to make decisions. They're not there. It's not a popularity contest. They're there to make the best decisions in the interest of the team that they're in charge of.
And is that the key? You've got to get everyone to buy into that.
Yeah, you have. For me, the way I would like to think we work with, players who are different, shall we call them, is, what are they giving to the team ultimately? You know, are they winning games for us? Because I think any player in the dressing room, if you've got a player who's different but he's winning you lots of games, they'll put up with it. You know, they'll put up with him maybe missing the team meal this particular day, or you know, turning up late for training or whatever. They'll kind of let that go. The problems start when suddenly he's not performing. You know, that's when the problems start for us, because we don't want him to be seen to have too much of a special case, and the players then start, well, why is he getting away with that? So the emphasis shifts as soon as your team's not winning, or B, he's not performing. So that's what you're going to be mindful of, that you don't let it go too far, you don't give him too much rope, if you like, but at the same time, you know, you've got to try and get that balance between your match winner performing well for you, but still being enough a part of a team that the lads still regard him as a team member. The problem is when, you know, it's too detrimental to the team, and then you've got a problem, and then you probably have to act.
Talk me through the Aaron Finch deal, because I'm guessing he doesn't come cheap. He's very, very good at what he does. Is that a case of, you know, and you know he's going to do a good job for you? It's, are you speculating to accumulate? I mean, finances, as you said, are tight. You know, is that a? I mean, it's now down to your team to sell him. He's brought him in. Yeah. You sell him. You've all, you know, on cricketing terms, he sells himself. But you've got to go and put the bums on seats. Is that was the negotiation part of the negotiation?
I think you tend to learn your lessons, don't you, from your mistakes. And last year we were unable to bring in overseas players, and it left ourselves a little bit short in that department. Previous year we had both Miller and Stark playing for us, and we knew when we signed Kane Williamson, who was more of a specialist long form cricketer, that there was a chance that he'd be missing in the months of June and July. There was a scheduled tour to West Indies. So rather than making the same mistakes as we made last year, through no fault of our own at the time, we said, okay, we've got to plug that gap. And from that point on, it was entirely a decision as to who they wanted to bring in, the cricket department. But you know, we talk daily, hourly. You know, so it's not these decisions are not made in complete isolation, and then I'm surprised by what's coming in my direction. With Aaron, they came up with Aaron Finch. We were able to do a deal. Part of that deal was that he was very keen to come and play for Yorkshire. He'd played league cricket for Clifton Alliance and absolutely smashed it. In fact, after he left, I think it was in 2009, was it?
809.
That particular league refused to have overseas players because he really did smash it. And he wanted to come back and play for Yorkshire. He, again, understood what Yorkshire and cricket meant. And he needs to prove himself in the longer form of the game in order to play Test cricket for Australia. So here was a perfect opportunity from his perspective to come and play for a major club, a club that is well associated with Australians, with Darren Lehman and Jason, to play what we want him to specifically play and put bums on seats, but also to improve himself as a cricketer. There's nothing worse in cricket or football or rugby than bringing a guy in who's towards the end of his career. I call them pension players. You need somebody to come into your environment that's going to want to win. Absolute desire, determination to improve themselves. And I don't care whether that's on the sporting field or in a business environment. Those are the people that you're looking for, not somebody that is sort of a little bit tired and looking for a final payday. So Aaron Finch ticked every single box from our perspective.
Yeah, but we picked him initially on a cricketing reasons, not financial.
Yeah.
It just so happens that, you know, hopefully he will put bums on seats as well.
Yeah. But I'm guessing he doesn't come cheap. There's got to be a give and take. I mean, if you said finances aren't cheap,
well, one of the great things about cricket compared to football is that there is a salary cap there. And we say when we're talking to agents and players that, you know, we've got one piece of cake here. And therefore we need to cut it up evenly. We need to give ourselves every opportunity of bringing in other players that are going to make the team perform so that you can win things. His desire to come and play for Yorkshire meant that the finances were of less of a consequence than they otherwise might have been.
I mean, T20 cricket for counties is a big chance to make some money.
Yeah.
But Yorkshire, I mean, I remember when I sat through a presentation by the ECB and came back quite enthused by it. I mean, all the numbers and Yorkshire, when it first came out, were like, they weren't interested. It just didn't, as a club, they were, this is comedy. And then they saw the crowd, then they saw people, and it was a bit like Yorkshire were a bit slow on the uptake on that.
Well, Yorkshire traditionally are about winning the county championship. You know, the vast majority of Yorkshire members aren't interested in T20 cricket, I think it's fair to say. You know, they would much prefer us to win the county championship than they would the T20 competition. But as you say, you know, once people saw, actually people like to come and watch this match, then, you know, the financial rewards were there to be seen. So, you know, with that in mind, and having got to finals day in 2012, which in that particular year enabled us to go on to Champions League, which is basically a mini World Cup for counties or states, you know, in other parts of the world. So South Africa, Australia, India, the IPL teams from India were involved in Champions League. So we got to go to South Africa for a month and play against the best teams in the world, which again was a money spinner for the club as well. Unfortunately, because of shall we say, relationships between England and India, that's not an annual event, unfortunately, because the timings don't kind of match for our season, but hopefully one day it will be. But as far as, you know, 2020 for Yorkshire this season is, you know, we identified from a purely cricketing point of view that in 2013, we ate up 50% of the balls that we faced in T20 cricket last year were dot balls, which was the highest in the whole country. And our boundary count last year, as opposed to 2012, was half. So we were scoring half as many boundaries last year to what we did when we got to the final. You know, last year David Miller pulled out. We got him lined up to come, hadn't we, last year, and he pulled out at the last minute because he'd been playing a lot for South Africa and wanted a rest. So we were left a bit high and dry. And we didn't really have those boundary hitters, if you like, that we'd had the previous year, because Johnny Bairstow wasn't playing for us. He was with England. Joe Root similarly was with England, so we didn't have that firepower that we had the previous year. So with that in mind, that's when, you know, the Finch factor, if you like, came in, that we need somebody who's an explosive batsman.
Looking ahead to this season, you probably will have some of your England contingent back. A bit battered and bruised, I'm guessing, a couple of them, partly because of the Australians, but partly because of the management. I would, from the outside looking in, I just think you're going to have to put an arm around them. Have you kept in constant contact with them in terms of their domestic coach? Yeah,
we've been in touch, you know, Martyn and myself at various times, and obviously their teammates here. And they've come back, and we've seen them all at various stages, those lads. Johnny Bairstow's in Sri Lanka at the moment with the England Lions. As well as a couple of other of our players. But those lads, they're now over in the Caribbean, preparing to play over there, and then the T20 World Cup. So we just hope they're okay. Like, the long and short of it, they're all right. They're disappointed. I don't think they enjoyed the tour a lot, to be perfectly honest. They've admitted that you know, but that tends to happen when you get thumped by Aussies.
You're not allowed to gloat.
No, okay, I won't gloat. I won't gloat. No, but look, I must admit, I had a bit of mixed feelings, Tanya. Obviously, having no, I did. A few of our Yorkie lads, you know, we want to see them perform really well on the world stage. You know, but part of my role is to, you know, although we want to win trophies at Yorkshire, you know, part of our role is to get lads playing for England and living their dream, so to speak. So, you know, I want to see them do well. So I was a bit disappointed on that front, but look, they're okay. They'll be fine. We'll welcome them with open arms when they're back with us. You know, we'll have a few lads, obviously with the England Lions, with the national side. We've got quite a lot of representation.
I was about to say, I mean, if you do get a couple of those guys back, you've got some of the youngsters are absolutely blasting it at the moment on the under-19s. You're going to have a selection headache on you probably. You're going back to the players that are left out.
Yeah, going to have a few sleepless nights, I think. And but that's a good problem to have, to be honest. And you know, I think lads by and large, they understand. You know, we're a big county, and you know, we do have you know, a strong squad, and so lads know that they're, you know, from time to time, you know, it's going to be tough to get a place, and all they can do is control their own games and best prepare as well as they can, and you know, make the selectors pick them.
It's one of the problems we have in planning, you know, for squads for the subsequent years is trying to guess who's going to be available to us. You know, and it's a really tricky balance, again, particularly with finances, you know, being quite tight. You know, we have to have probably a slightly larger staff than most counties, I think it's fair to say, because we're not sure, you know, who's available. So we have to cover in case Johnny Bairstow's picked, in case Gary Balance is picked. Joe Root now's got a central contract, so his salary's been taken away from us. So that helps, as is Tim Bresnan. But, you know, last year we only had Tim Bresnan on a central contract, so we were effectively playing Johnny Bairstow, Joe Root, hardly saw them. You know, but we need somebody to play when they're not with us, so you've got to, you know, it's a double hit, really.
Just before I throw it open, you talked about Colin Graves. I sort of think of the big, you know, it's almost like God sitting over the place. I mean, what is his involvement now? And I mean, he's almost the person who's not here, isn't he, of the management team, because he has been very instrumental in the club.
Yeah, his day-to-day involvement is practically zero. Obviously, any major decisions that we take, then I would speak to him by phone. He attends the board meetings, but you know, he's now deputy chairman of the England and Wales Cricket Board, and they've got some issues, and you know, he's dealing with that here and now. He's incredibly supportive of Yorkshire cricket. He absolutely loves it, and he is also the lender of the last resort. But we have to run this as a business, but at the same time, make sure we're giving ourselves every opportunity of winning things, because that is what we're here for. We want to win competitions, cricket competitions, and not just balance the books. So it's a very fine balancing act that we have to do, but you know, that is a challenge that really excites us.
And just money is very tight in sport, other than football, which just seems to be soaking up everything. I mean, you must weep when you see somebody getting £300,000 a week. But is there money still coming into cricket, or is that a struggle just to get the money to come in?
I have more of a problem with players below the £300,000 a week in the Championship who are earning extraordinary amounts of money, and they're, you know, they're second-rate players. So I have, having had 13 years of that, I have more of a problem there. Cricket, we have some really good partners. We are very fortunate being the largest county, and Yorkshire, you know, very much being Yorkshire, we like to feel that we give our partners and sponsors great value for money and personal attention. And certainly with what these guys have created, they could be on the start of an incredibly good journey.
Open to you guys.
Looking back and having conversations with a couple of players, I didn't really believe in the plan. And it's interesting, the guys that probably didn't quite believe in it were the ones that didn't get it right. But also the fact is, and Martyn mentioned some statistics, you know, another statistic that really hit home for us was average score of 130. In T20 cricket this day and age, you don't win many games scoring 130 runs. Whether you bat first, teams are chasing that down by 15 over mark, and conversely, you know, when you're chasing 160, if your average score's 130, you're not winning too many games. So there was a combination of factors. We can blame Yorkers, and you know, there were some lads that just didn't quite get that right. Some lads got it absolutely right. But there was a combination of things. We identified you know, quite a number of factors as to why we didn't perform last year, and the lads have been very open and honest with in their assessment of their season, especially in T20 last year.
I mean, one of the things about that is, you know, since then we've had lots of discussion about whether Yorkers is the right plan. You know, because a few of the lads have said the same as you. Well, people know what we're going to bowl now, and they can, you know, prepare, if you like, for that delivery. But we watched a lot of T20 cricket, haven't we, this winter, the Big Bash and things like that. And you know, if you watch it, if you get a Yorker right, it still goes for fewest runs. You know, and if you get the field set correctly, you know, it's about how many. At the end of an innings, you're going to go for runs, but it's how many. And if you can reduce the the number of boundaries, then that you're doing your job. So it's about over a period of time what's going to be more successful. Because you see, bowlers at the end of an innings bowling slow balls and slow ball bouncers, and they disappear out the park as well. So ultimately, again, we're going to be having a discussion over the next few weeks, and we'll come up with a plan.
Yeah, and further to that, it's interesting, the lads that, I know when I arrived at the club and there was this big discussion amongst the bowling squad, the guys that weren't that keen to buy into it, we delved a little bit deeper, and they were the ones that probably didn't practice that particular skill as much as anyone else. They weren't as confident. So, rather than just saying that and saying, look, I'm not as confident with it, they blame the plan, as opposed to looking in the mirror and going, well, hang on a minute, what can I do to contribute to this and improve? And when we found, and Martyn mentioned an example of one of the bowlers, he went away and decided that he actually hadn't done the work required to be part of the team to get that plan right. And when he did, it was amazing. He was probably one of our most effective lads in that particular skill in 2012. So,
is that one of the key jobs for you, is to get them to be honest with themselves? Because you can tell somebody to you're blue in the face, but they have to be honest with themselves. But my industry, you are dealing with egos, where egos, and it's a tricky one.
I think the best players are honest with themselves. That's how they get better. They learn from mistakes, they learn from what doesn't work, and they put into practice things that do work. If you're kidding yourself, I think that's probably in any walk of life, if you kid yourself that what you're doing is right but it's clearly not working, then you ain't going to get very far. So I think for me, the best players are honest in their appraisal of their own performance. Yeah, I think again it goes back to the mix of the group, and sometimes when players are coming to the end of their careers, it becomes more about them than the team sometimes, because one of the hardest things is when your career comes to an end. I think
yeah, absolutely.
I think we were both probably lucky that, well, certainly I was lucky in that I went straight into coaching when I finished playing. So that's very fortunate. But a lot of players, once their playing career is finished, there's a big void. So that's a pretty scary prospect for a number of players. So that can affect how they behave and how they are going into those final weeks of the season. I think, going back to 2011, there was lots of things, a bit like the, losing 2020 games. There's lots of things together, when they come together, produce the whole, if you like. So I think it's not just one thing, it's lots of little things that aren't going right. And, I think hopefully I'm better for that experience, that you can, you can see these things coming hopefully a bit earlier, and try and act before it gets too bad, if that makes sense.
Mark alluded to earlier, and one of the differences with cricket is they are away from home so much, living on top of each other. You don't want bland characters who kind of don't ever speak out. I mean, how do you get that mix between them, having a character, being allowed to speak out, but fitting into this group that is on top of each other?
Look, it's very simple, really. At Yorkshire we have a few non-negotiables. And the lads are all very clear on that. That's certainly, you're exactly right. We don't want bland characters, and I can assure you we don't have bland characters. We've got some fantastic lads. And there's, there are issues that crop up from time to time. But, last year there was one instance where, we felt as a coaching staff that we took some real strides forward because there was self-policing amongst the players. There was a lad that maybe he was just having a bit of a moan and getting ahead of himself a little bit, and a couple of the lads, a couple of good mates of his, just spoke to him and pulled him into line a little bit, and without any intervention or anything from the support staff, and we thought that was a real step forward for our squad, because there is a common goal. Everyone is moving in that one direction, and they could see that someone maybe wasn't quite on board for a week or so, and just getting away from that common goal, and they jumped in, and we felt that was a real step forward for us.
And can I, sorry, just add to that, sorry, put in. I think, you know, one of the strengths of us how we are now is that none of us who've kind of got positions of authority are afraid to say, got that wrong. You know, and I think that is the key, that ultimately, you know, the way we work is somebody's got responsibility to make a decision about whatever it is. So, you know, if it's a team selection for argument's sake, you know, it's down to Jason and Andrew Gale as captain to, you know, make that final decision. You know, and then he's supported, whatever that decision is, he's supported by the rest of us. If that's proven to be wrong or it doesn't work, then, you know, he'll hold his hand up, well, we got that wrong. Or similarly with Andrew Gale, you know, ultimately when the lads are on the field, you know, he'll have opinions coming from various sources on the field, but he's got to make, you know, he's the man who has to make the final decision, well, this is what we're going to do. And if it doesn't work, then you know, he'll say, well, it didn't work that time. And that's the environment hopefully we've got, is that people understand that, you know, you make a decision you know, for the best reasons at that time. Sometimes it doesn't work, but, you know, mistakes happen. You know, and that's, again, you know, we try and create that environment whereby it's okay to make mistakes. You know, you will make mistakes. You know, we're human beings after all. You know, in a split-second decision, sometimes you'll get it wrong. But as long as we learn from those mistakes, then you're better for it. So it's, you know, no, we don't have a fear of making mistakes. And again, because we haven't hopefully got the egos, we're not, you know, again saying, well, on that occasion it didn't work. We'll do it differently next time. So,
mate, you alluded to the fact that the environment they've created in the playing has filtered through. I mean, how has that filtered through? Is it just, it's all a very close-knit environment, and or is that kind of been observed from your group, or have you sat yours down and said, look, this is how they're doing it?
Not at all. The coaching staff work in the same open plan office, so we're all in it together. And during this winter, in order to connect with the cricket clubs in Yorkshire, we've visited over 40 clubs all around the county to do Q&As, and coaching staff have been there, the off-field staff have been there, and the players have been there. So there's been anything between 4 and 6 of us. And you know, when you're all pulling in the same direction and you all want the same thing, which ultimately is success, then the environment brings you together. And I don't think it's a magic wand. It's happened over a period of time, and probably where, you know, after they got relegated in 2011, they had a really good look at themselves and started to make changes. And certainly anybody from the office side will feel very comfortable, you know, in the company of these guys who've been there and done it for their respective countries. And that's not, as you know yourself, that is not always the case in all sporting environments.
One of my concerns coming back was being the leader and the coach of lads I played cricket with. As I was overseas player here in 06, 07, and then coming back as coach, there's quite a few lads. There's still a number of lads now who I actually played with. So I was a little bit concerned with how that would work. I don't know how the players thought that. I know a couple of senior lads who I was reasonably close to. You know, I was involved in the decision with Martyn to let them go, you know, move on, and that was very challenging. There's no doubt there were sleepless nights there, having to have that conversation, you know, as someone who you know quite well and you're good friends with. That was probably, for me, that was a real challenge. And I suppose, in a way, it's something that you never love doing, you know, I'm sure Martyn will tell you, is telling a player that he's not playing. It may not sound like much, but you know, when you know how hard lads work and put the time and effort into what they're trying to do, is essentially they're living their dream. And you know, every time you deselect them, you know, that's, you know, just a little stab at them that they're a bit disappointed with. You know, they're absolutely fine, and it's more my thinking that, oh, what have I done? But, you know, at all times, you're always making the best interest in for the team and what the team needs. But, you know, it's never easy, and I'm not sure it'll ever get easier. but you always got to do the right thing by the team, in my view, and make, you know, the best decision you can. I hope that answered your question.
I think probably there's lots of difficult things I find in management and coaching, but probably the most difficult is trying to get the balance right between being their mate and their boss. You know, so there's times when you want to be able to find out about them and get them to open up and tell you. You know, the worst thing is when you know there's a problem, you ask, "Are you okay?" and he says, "Yeah," and you know he's not. You know, and having that relationship that they're willing to tell you what is wrong. You know, when you're the boss as well, you know, any sign of perceived sign of weakness from them, they think that they're going to get sacked. You know, so that is a really tricky relationship to build, I think.
How mindful of you is it's an increasing issue now of depression among sportsmen, and you can understand why, and it is very difficult, and particularly for you guys when you are living together so much. Is that something you've grown increasingly conscious of as a coach, and you look back maybe at your playing career and think, yeah, actually he had problems, and men aren't the greatest about talking about their personal problems?
Well, they're not, and we are. You know, we are very aware now of that. So when there is, you know, if a player isn't doing something that we'd like him to do, I mean, we've kind of got a bit of a situation with the player at the minute that we're just trying to find out what's going on here with this lad, because his behaviour isn't as we would want it. So we're trying to dig, you know, to find out what's behind. You know, has he got problems at home, or, you know, what is causing him to be as he is? So, you know, we're very aware of, you know, the depression side of things, you know, and obviously the Jonathan Trott thing this winter just highlighted it yet again. You know, so you have to kind of be careful how you speak to the lads nowadays. Are
you I mean, is it a very, very different atmosphere in the dressing room that you oversee to how it was when you were playing?
Oh yes. You Sanko's, you know, Sanko's won, didn't you? When I first, you know, as a young player going into the Yorkshire dressing room of the early 80s, it was, you know, you're on your own, kid, really. Having said that, there were 2 or 3, you know, senior players at the time who were very good to me, so they helped me along the way. But, you know, you didn't have a coach as such. Once you got into the first team, you were very much on your own. The second team, you had a coach, a bit of a mentor. That was kind of fine. But once you're in the first team, you're on your own. And, you know, if you didn't have a pint of lager, you were soft. You know, you weren't allowed soft drinks at the end of play drinks in those days. And you're coming with me. And that was it.
Things have changed.
Very harsh.
Moved on a bit.
Yeah, very much so. But moved in the right direction, I think. Yeah, I know when I first started, you know, I had a couple of senior lads in South Australian dressing room who just took me on board. That was fantastic, and, you know, they're still great mates to this day. You know, probably the one that had the biggest influence on me, funny enough, is the current Australian coach, Darren, who's, you know, a great mate of mine. He was the first one that walked up to me when I was this nervous little 18-year-old in the dressing room, just sitting there, and you know, he actually took me on board. He you know, just wanted to know about me as a person, not just as a cricketer, and you know, we became instant mates, and, you know, I sort of looked up to him.
I'm guessing he's of the beer brigade, though, knowing what I know about Derek.
Oh, yeah, certainly dragged me out for a couple of pints, yeah, no question.
He's a very social
sociable
kind of guy, yeah.
But it was in a good way, and you know, it made you feel comfortable. And I remembered that from when I first started as a player, and how intimidated I was walking in the South Australian dressing room. And you know, that's something that I took with me when I went into the Australian dressing room. I was a bit nervous. I'd never played against most of the Australian lads, and they didn't even know who I was, half of them, because I got into the side out of nowhere in a way, because they'd been travelling away. So I didn't know anyone. I was a little bit intimidated, but they were very welcoming, with open arms, and you know, so sort of taken that further. And I suppose now, you know, in a coaching role, you know, I think it's very important that when we have a new player come in, even if it's a guy who's coming to just bowl in the nets for, you know, a couple of times and help us out, you know, we try and go out of our way to make sure that they're as comfortable as possible, and they can, because they're helping us out. And then if we get a young player coming through, you know, they get all the support that we can give them.
Well, you've got to build a relationship. That's first and foremost. You know, you've got to get them to trust what they tell you. You know, isn't going to ruin their career, if you like. And, you know, it's a constant message. You know, if you have got a problem, come and talk to us. You know, we're here to help. You know, part of our support staff is a sports psychologist. We've just changed the guy we use, actually, so he's just, again, starting to build those relationships. So he's currently having like a half an hour get to know you session with each of the lads. You know, so initially some will tell him, you know, pretty much everything about their life. Others will be very reluctant, but you know, that's kind of the first stage, if you like, to making sure that they've got somebody, you know, and that's really what we try and tell the lads is, it might not be me, it might not be Dizzy, but speak to somebody. You know, we had a case last year of a lad who you know, really struggled. You know, he had a lot of injuries at the start of the season, wasn't in the team, he'd had success the previous year, wasn't in the first team, was really battling, you know, with his game. And, you know, he got himself into a really bad way. And, you know, again, we learned from that, and we said to him, you know, you cannot have all your problems on your own shoulders. You need to speak to somebody.
How does the relationship with the psychologist work? I mean, is there a sort of patient confidentiality thing, or is it an agreed thing that they can tell you something? Because presumably, if they didn't want to go straight to you, it's because they didn't want you to know, didn't feel comfortable. There's got to be a sort of between it.
The way it works is the lads know that he's there to help them, and if he needs to tell us something, they know he will. But there will be stuff that he'll keep to himself, you know, because it will be him mainly trying to help them either, you know, deal with pressure, deal with poor form, or deal with personal issues. So, you know, we probably won't get to know 100%, but it's the skill of the psychologist to know what he can tell us. And, you know, he will tell the player, or he'll ask the player, can I share that with Dizzy or myself? You know, so the player will give permission. But it's about the players knowing that we're there to help them. You know, and that's, again, for me now in the position I'm in is, you know, I'm the one that, you know, pretty much has to make the final call. Do we sack somebody or do we keep them on? You know, so that, you know, that's where it normally isn't me that they come to with their problems.
I think also we've recently brought Anthony McGrath back into the fold as a consultant because he left at the end of 2012 through injury. And we recognised that there was a little bit of a void there. And so he's now back and around the place doing some coaching, but also mentoring both younger players and older players. So if they don't really feel like talking to one of their bosses, they've got somebody whose ear that they can bend. And Anthony is also going to help to facilitate change from cricket into everyday life. If you start talking to somebody, you know, in the last year of their contract, they start to get very nervous, or, you know, are they going to sack me at the end of the season? So we want Anthony to start that process a lot earlier, with players approaching the 30th birthday or thereabouts, to try and find out, you know, they may well have 35, 40 years of work out there, so retraining or, you know, the type of area of business that they want to go into. So Anthony's going to come back and help that transition as well. And there's so much insecurity in professional sports people, and what we've got to do to get the best performance out of them on the pitch is take some of those issues away.
It's hard to know, again, you know, a bit like the KP thing, unless you're there within the inner sanctum, you can't 100% sure what's gone on, but clearly something drastically has gone wrong, hasn't it, over the last few months. You know, having gone from a very successful team, albeit I know last summer although we won 3-0, you know, it wasn't as convincing as 3-0 would suggest. So there were kind of cracks appearing, if you like, but to go from that to being an absolute shambles, really, you know, and you hesitate to criticise decisions, but there were some very odd decisions as well, I think, as far as selections were concerned during that period. So you're scratching your head, wondering, well, what has actually gone wrong here? You know, so there's a lot of rebuilding to be done. Not least on personnel, because without Swan, without Peterson, possibly without Trott, you know, you've got 3 massive holes within the team to start with, before you even think about what the management of the team is like. So, you know, there's a huge rebuilding job to be done, and a slate has to be wiped clean, and you know, whoever gets the head coach's job or whatever the title becomes, you know, has got a a lot of work to do in a relatively short space of time. You know, Paul Downton's taken over as a new managing director, and you know, I would imagine he's working tirelessly, behind the scenes to try and pull it all together. But the next kind of 6 weeks are going to be very interesting to see what happens. But yeah, we've got a tough job, I think.
How worried were you two that you might lose him to it? You came out pretty quickly and said you weren't, but went out there.
Not interested.
I think one of the problems with the England setup latterly is that they split the roles, and I think you can only have one voice. There has to be one person in charge, and again, you can take that into ordinary life out of sport. And by having so many different people, I also think that the entourage that they had out in Australia, I think it was man-to-man marking, 18 players and 21 support staff. Recent under-19 tournament out in UAE, where we unfortunately lost today in the semi-final. Young lads, they had 14 support staff. Too many voices. And I think, that can be quite a corrupting influence in many ways. So I think Paul Downton, having been out of cricket probably since 1988 or something like that, will give it a completely new perspective, and perhaps it's time for an overhaul.
Well, it's long. Actually, yes, I was going to go down this route. West Yorkshire has a substantial Asian population. Would future consideration ever be given to hosting neutral test matches involving Pakistan, Bangladesh and possibly India at Headingley? Might have had your fingers burnt on that one. Pakistan played Australia in 2010 at Headingley and the ground was virtually empty, but I recall from memory that tickets were overpriced. Gallons of booze isn't like to be sold at these matches. Pack the ground full with a variety of stalls and target sponsorships specifically. There are a number of large Asian restaurants and businesses in the area. Alter the bar areas to food outlets and work in partnership to generate income in other ways. A sensible pricing structure. The suggestion here is adults £15, kids for free if supervised, would encourage attendance, and a fuller ground makes for a better spectacle and atmosphere. Get the kids in. After all, it'll be the young Asian kids of today who'll be representing England in 15 years' time. Have fingers been so burnt you wouldn't ever go there again? Or
I think we'd have to do our research properly. There was a gut feeling about taking the neutral test rather than England-Bangladesh, I believe. That was the choice. Fundamentally, I think we would tend to support England, but we're starting a new 4-year project in both Bradford and Leeds within the British Asian community to understand what they want from us and how we can help them. One of the experiences that we had last year, unfortunately, was that in the match against Lancashire, where we lost complete control of we've renamed it actually the White Rose Stand. There are a lot of Muslim families there who are being covered in beer, which is totally unacceptable. So what we've done for this year is create 4 separate enclosures, and we've got one community enclosure where no alcohol can be consumed. And that's not a small enclosure, it's about 1,800 people. So I think we've got to do a lot of research before we dip our toe into that market. Fundamentally, we do want England here. We want England here on a regular basis, and one of the challenges that we've got is that after 2019, there may no longer be international cricket in Leeds. The problem is, A, our infrastructure, especially the football stand end of the ground, not being fit for purpose in the modern era. And B, we're not filling the grounds. And I think I have to agree with you. One of the reasons we haven't been filling the grounds is that there's been a tendency towards overpricing. And we're having to convince the ECB that it is different up north. And certainly for this year, having learnt from the New Zealand experience last year, we have reduced prices in a lot of the areas and introduced early bird buying incentives. So I don't know, it's certainly not on the agenda now. What is really important is that we do understand what people in the British Asian communities around West Yorkshire really want from us, and that's why there's a serious piece of work being undertaken.
Has that been another new thing that as you've finally got Asian players coming through? Obviously, that it is different religions, different behaviours coming into the environment. Is that something you guys have also had to work on and buy into to make sure it's an inclusive group? Yeah, I mean, obviously, the various Asian lads have different, ways of living their lives, but we certainly don't stand in any way, if they want to do something, with regards to their religion or what they eat, etc., then they do what they need to do, and to be fair, the lads accept that. So there's not, fortunate enough, there's been no issues whatsoever in that respect.
We're a very inclusive organisation. That's our style of management.
But it's fair to say Yorkshire hasn't always been, has it? I mean,
well,
is that,
you say that, but I've been here a long time, and we've been branded a racist club, weren't we, back in the 80s, which for me was never the case. The fact was in that period of our history, there weren't any Asian cricketers good enough to play. If there had been, they would have been picked. As it is now, that's changed. There's lots of Asian cricketers good enough to be in our age group teams and obviously in our first team. So, I think we were falsely branded at that time. And my experience is that Yorkshire's never been, racist. But it's difficult once you've had that, isn't it, to change the perception? Yeah, well, it is. Mud sticks, I suppose, isn't it? But I never saw anything that was actively racist in my time at the club.
A couple of weeks ago, I went down to the Carmen Community Centre in Bradford. I was invited down and spent a couple of hours there looking around. And it's a fantastic facility, and people there absolutely love the game of cricket. And what we have to do is understand what we can do for them, not necessarily what they can do for us. We have budgets that we adhere to. We're very fortunate in this county that not only do, I suppose, 85–90% of the players are very much homegrown because of our fantastic pathways structure, but we also tend to provide players for other counties as well. So whilst we have one of the largest squads because of, last summer, I think there were 13 Yorkshiremen representing England at under 17, under 19 Lions and full England level, and we've had 10 overseas during this winter. So, we have to have a large squad. It's not necessarily an overly paid squad. There is something unique about the county in that there's a huge desire, if you're born and brought up in the county, there's a huge desire to play for Yorkshire. I don't think you find it anywhere else in the country, so we're lucky from that respect. With regard to communications with universities, I think half of our backroom staff are alumni of Leeds Metropolitan University. We have a very close relationship with the university. I'm very happy to turn up if invited to talk to people at any time. We've been, as I said earlier, undertaking a project like that throughout the cricket clubs. We'll talk to anybody who will listen to us.
We are in the process of taking interns as well. I mean, we've done over the last few years had an intern for S&C, and we're just in discussions now with the university about a sports coaching intern or two to work alongside the coaches, and also another S&C intern as well. So there is that going on, as well as potential office internships. So it is quite a close link with Leeds Met. And as Marcus said, first and foremost, we try and recruit from within. So it's about the development through our academy into first team cricket. The only time we'll recruit from outside is if we feel we've got a gap for whatever reason. One of the biggest things as a captain, having been one myself, is about your own form. So, you know, you're very conscious of you contributing to the team with your own performance, whether that be with bat or ball. So, you know, any captain will be, if they're not performing, will be, you know, worried, shall we say, because you do feel that you are letting the side down. You know, from my point of view, it'd be interesting to know what Diz thinks, but from my point of view, you can have a captain who, you know, is, if you like, one of the lesser players, as long as, you know, they give the value as captain. So, you know, their man management or the decision making on the field or whatever. I suppose one of the things I played when Ray Illingworth came back to be captain back in 1983. And he was 53 years old, I think he was, when he did that. And, you know, clearly, Illy at 53 wasn't going to be, you know, a spring chicken in the field. He wasn't going to get many runs, but he was still okay as a bowler. But what he was very good at was captaining the side on the field. You know, he was brilliant. You know, he knew what to do, when to do it, and we won the John Player League. That was the 40-over competition that particular year. So that was an example, I think, of someone who clearly added value to the team purely as a captain. So I think you can, but you need to be very good as a captain if you're not performing, you know, with bat or ball. It's like Brian Close, wasn't it? And, you know, when he was captain, he was obviously a very fine player, but he was capable of managing the egos of your Trumans, your boycotts and whatever, you know, because he got them, allegedly picked him up and hung him on the coat peg if they disagreed with him. So, but he had that ability of bringing the team together, and that's what you need to be able to do as a captain.
Yeah, I think Martyn's right. I think in exceptional circumstances, I think that can possibly work. But I think by and large, I think the captain doesn't necessarily have to be the best player in the side, but they do have to justify a position in the 11. And but by and large, the captain should be in the best 11 that you can put on the park. We're certainly very fortunate at Yorkshire. We've got a fantastic leader in Andrew Gale, on and off the field. He's only spoken to us the other day about, you know, he's come to us and he's, you know, looking at ways at how he can communicate even better with our players. This is a lad who's been in the role for 4 or 5 seasons now, and he's still looking at ways that he can improve his communication with all of our players. And, you know, to me, that's a sign of one of a very good captain and someone that's willing to learn and improve all the time.
Me? I'll start. Garfield Sobers. When I was growing up as a youngster, I'm left-handed, and I like to bowl reasonably quick left arm over and slow left arm when I got a bit tired, and I like to bat as well. So he was just a magnificent cricketer. So for me, it was Garfield Sobers.
Personally, I don't have a cricketing hero as such. I have a lot of people I admire as cricketers. My hero was Alan Ball, you know, which is another story. But you know, I remember watching the World Cup final, and you know, he just stuck out in my mind, and kind of I followed him ever since. And you know, if I've got one hero, it would be him. But as far as cricketers, probably the person I would most like to have been able to bat like, and I was nowhere near him, was Viv Richards. Having played against him, he was unbelievable. So I'd love to have been able to play like him. Yeah,
you know, obviously I grew up watching the Australian side, so a lot of players that, you know, I admired, and all the fast bowlers really. I just loved watching them. Dennis Lillies, the Craig McDermott's, Merv Hughes', Rodney Hoggs. But my overall favourite cricketing hero, I suppose, was Malcolm Marshall from the West Indies. Just a wonderful fast bowler. Just used to be mesmerised watching him bowl. Could just watch him bowl all day. And so yeah, I'd probably have to say from a cricketing point of view. Yeah, non-cricketing, I went through a little phase as a kid. Hulk Hogan, wrestler.
That is it. Thanks to the Yorkshire trio, and good luck for the season.